Hello, friends. Welcome to the Ancient Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Motley, and today I have a very special guest with me. I have to say that he's one of the smartest docs that I've seen on social media, but also he is the Chief Medical Officer at Timeline. And Timeline is a beautiful supplement that I recommend to my patients about anti-aging, and it has to do with mitochondria and energy production as we get older. Dr. Anurag Singh is one of the brightest minds and I've seen so far online. And Doc, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on today and talking with us.
Oh, pleasure is all mine, Dr. Motley. Thanks for having me.
Well, I know that when we talk about timeline, we're talking about cellular energy. But before we get into that, Doc, I love to find out more about you as well. What is the passion that brought you into learning about and studying mitochondria, cellular energy, and aging?
Sure, yeah. So I trained as an internal medicine physician about 25 years back. And trained as a very young doctor. And I was seeing all these old people in my clinic. Trained initially in India, and then I did my advanced fellowship in the US. And it was really then seeing many of these, older people walk in with chronic ailments, which, it was almost too late to do much about it. It was more symptom management and delaying the inevitable. And I really, interacting with these patients at that time, I realized a lot of them had COPD, heart conditions, etc., that much of the damage was happening as a way of their lifestyle and diet, exercise, etc., much earlier on. And so that got me interested in doing medical research. So I ended up getting a PhD in immunology, and I was really studying how the immune system ages from the time you go from 40, 50 to 70, 80 years. And again and again, it became very clear to me that a lot of the immune aging happens in two waves, one in the early 40s and one in the mid 60s. And so that it's been 20 years of going down that rabbit hole of research and longevity and really figuring out. And yeah, a lot of it is point to what we talk about, mitochondrial dysfunction.
Wow. So, Doc, when you talked about that, the gap of 40 to 60, was there particular reasons? Like, we will probably get into that, but did you see like a huge issue within the cells between 40 and 60 that people started having problems?
Yeah, so we started looking at different ages, 20, 30-year-olds and 40, 50, 60-year-olds, and even much older. What became very clear, and most of my early research was on immune cells and muscle cells, was very clear was people who were exercising all their life. If you look at a 70-year-old person who's been training for half marathons, running half marathons most of their adult life, their muscle cells pretty much look like a 30, 40-year-old's muscle cell. So exercise is probably the number one longevity elixir, and we all need to somehow incorporate it. Now, if you look at the same age matched 70-year-old who has been sedentary all their life, theirs just looks like a train wreck. And when I mean a train wreck, it really means if you do muscle biopsies or you take blood draws and look at the immune cells, the mitochondria were super shot in these, and their cells had a lot of what I call markers of cellular stress and damage. And so you're basically like a factory of damaged goods sitting on, and that drives the whole aging trajectory.
Wow. So we have the damaged goods. And so you're saying like actually the internal parts of our cells can actually age, or mitochondria can actually get aged. And when you were seeing this, I would love to later when we talk about age, I've heard that different cells have different amounts of mitochondria. So it's really, really important to know like the brain power, the muscle power, and the organs. And when we talk about mitochondria, the discoveries with, let's go into like urolithin A. I'm not trying to jump too far ahead, but did you find certain things was starting to decrease the age internally of the cells? Like what is that natural process and what started to hinder the aging process from your research?
Yeah, so the best way is to start looking at cells and smaller species. That's how most of aging research or longevity research starts to happen. Is you're trying to benchmark to something which is the gold standard, which is caloric restriction. Caloric restriction If you look at flies or preclinical models of different species, rodents, smaller species, if you just give 15-20% less food in their diet, these cells in these species will live about 40% longer. So
Wow.
this is well documented, and that's pretty much the gold standard of longevity research. So when you start, and the way we started was we knew the mitochondria were damaged, and we knew the cells were stressed and inflamed. Something else we pick up in sort of all the longevity research studies is that the damaged parts of this or of the the cellular organelles, they become like almost like inflammatory provokers. So they provoke a huge inflammatory response. And so what we did was we screened about 4,000 plus natural compounds, and of those we found a few that were improving mitochondrial health, and we benchmarked them, and that's how we discovered urolithin.
Wow. So urolithin A, can you talk a bit about that, Doc? What is urolithin A? What is that compound?
Yeah, so we started with we looked at all the literature in nutrition about 15 years back when we started with this idea, and there were things like berries, nuts, pomegranates that are part of what we know are superfoods and sort of superfruits. There's always in every culture you read the ancient textbooks, you'll find the pomegranate as a sort of a superfruit, and the pretty much same. And if you look at all the, let's say, the evidence on Mediterranean diet, it's eating nuts and berries. And so we started looking at these superfoods, and we found that it's well known that these have antioxidants and things
Mm,
what we call
mm,
polyphenols, which are complex health promoting natural compounds. Now, when we put them on these muscle cells that had damaged mitochondria, as I was telling you, or lower species, they were not showing us any benefit, and that started
mm,
puzzling us. And so we started focusing into what we call postbiotics. Now, postbiotics are basically, if you drink a glass of pomegranate juice, you're taking these antioxidants. Your gut microbiome will digest these very complex phenolic compounds and break them into smaller, simpler species. And this is what postbiotics are, or the other name is gut metabolites. And so what
mm.
we found was that urolithin A was this one gut metabolite or postbiotic that was having these remarkable health benefits, but not the dietary precursors.
Wow. So it was actually breaking down the components within the gut to actually help with your cells and be able to actually metabolize. And Doc, when we talk about aging, and there is something that has to do with like how a cell like actually gets injured. You saw it in the flies. Y- Different people, different areas have different types of cellular damage. If you repair with urolithin A, you're noticing like is there a percentage of time increase in a person's lifespan if you start to heal the mitochondria?
Yeah, so if you let's work backwards. Let's say if you look at smaller species, if you supplement the flies and the worms, which is where all the longevity research starts, we start seeing about almost a 45% increase in life extension and mobility. I mean, you can always extend lifespan, but you need to be more mobile and you need to be more functional. So we see about a 45 plus percent increase in mobility and in functionality and lifespan in these species. The studies in rodents have also been done. So there's preclinical models where they have seen life extension plus like 20% increase and benefits in different organs which rely on mitochondria for energy. In humans, it's almost impossible to do these studies because you basically have to take hundreds of individuals and follow them till it's all their life. So those studies have not been done. But what we have done is we have looked at sedentary, non-exercising folks and given them 4 months of urolithin A and seen about a 12 to 15% improvement in things like strength and functional capacity.
That is amazing. Do you find with the mitochondrial degradation is that called like mitophagy? Is that correct?
You got it. This is what I call the Pac-Man inside your cells. So basically, all the damaged mitochondria, they accumulate in a cell and take all the real estate in the body. As we age, our cells, as they age, they stop renewal, self-renewal process and cleaning out the waste. And so there's no real estate left. And so mitophagy is that process that you need to activate during aging.
Wow. So if we activate it, Doc, it means like the damaged portions of the mitochondria have to be some way recycled and repaired or reused to actually, because there's no real estate left in your cells. Like basically, you have to be reused. And when you have that, Doc, you were saying that when the mitochondria break down, it creates particles that basically can be seen as inflammatory. You're saying that those can be inflammatory within your cells. Your body looks at them as inflammatory agents.
Yeah, if you have too much of damaged mitochondria, then you have what I call sort of the leakiness of the. Now, mitochondria have their own DNA, okay,
Oh, wow.
which is separate from the cellular DNA, and it's mostly all coming from the maternal side. Mitochondria, just for your audience, are evolutionary, these ancient bacteria that integrated with the human cell, and provide all the necessary energy for the human cells to survive. So what happens with sort of this recycling process, exactly how you described, is that if you can't clean out the damaged mitochondria, these leak into systemic circulation, and these become triggers for chronic inflammation. And everybody who's aging is inflamed.
Wow. So, Doc, if you have a person who's an athlete or somebody who pushes their body, yes, you can have quicker degradation or injury to the mitochondria. So, people out there listening say, what are some of your main drivers you see in the environment of inflammation or mitochondrial damage? What pushes us to like really hurt our mitochondria at a higher level?
Oh, I believe we are now in a world where we are exposed to so many mitochondrial toxins and mitochondrial triggers of mitochondrial damage. So the top three or five, I would say, and there are many more, but the number one is inactivity. It's our sedentary lifestyle. You know, we used to walk, evolutionary, our forefathers would walk many hours to find food and gather food. We've lost that, right? And if you just look at a sedentary person's muscle cells versus a exercising, even if it's an 80-year-old person, it's remarkable how damaged the mitochondria are in a sedentary person. And I've done over thousands of muscle biopsies and seen in hundreds of these folks. That's the number one factor: physical inactivity. Second is sort of the overeating, processed food habits. So, things like fasting do help. There's why fasting, intermittent fasting, calorie restriction, you're starting to hear more and more, because eating 10-20% less is very helpful. It gives your mitochondria time to do this self-renewal and cleaning out. The others would be all the polymedication things like statins. Statins are extremely damaging, for example, to the mitochondria. And a lot of times you'll see practitioners give CoQ10 and other mitochondrial nutrients because they know some of these drugs are having a sort of not very beneficial effect on mitochondria. And then, yeah, everything we are, stress, our circadian rhythms, all these are very closely linked to mitochondria.
Mm. And you've said something really interesting, Doc, about how like the inflammatory agents from, the aging mitochondria, you have these external stressors. You're talking about like the postbiotic. How important, I guess, is gut health or gut stamina to mitochondrial health, to the aging process with this whole process?
I think this is really what I see is one of the biggest frontiers of medicine right now is figuring out what is the perfect gut microbiome, because I do believe every chronic ailment that we in the society today have, whether it's neurodegenerative diseases, cognitive decline, or poor uh, muscle health, all that, or inflammation. A lot of us have now, if you see just the peak of food allergies and IBD or inflammatory bowel disease, they have peaked. It all boils down to the gut microbiome. And we have seen the gut microbiome of a healthy 75, 80-year-old also versus a sedentary 75, 80-year-old. And so I've gone around actually looking at the prevalence of urolithin A production, because I believe
Mm.
if you have good gut health, you should be able to produce this molecule. And believe it or not, only about 20 to 30% people who think they're healthy have the ability to make this molecule, meaning only about one third of the world has the what I call the right gut microbiome.
Wow. So it does take a certain type of probiotic to actually, or biotic in your gut to actually help you produce this, and only a one third has it. So with urolithin A, would it mean that you would have to have higher concentrations of urolithin A if a person can't produce it on their own? They would have to have a certain amount to daily sustain their mitochondria. Do they need to take extra? Because you're saying they come from pomegranates.
Yeah, so pomegranates is the precursor. So if you're eating a bowl of berries or you're drinking a glass of pomegranate, you're doing 50% of the right job. Now, the other
Mm,
remaining 50% of the job needed to produce urolithin A at optimal levels is having this healthy gut microbiome. And I think uh, we've gone into different parts of the world, in Europe, in the U.S. and Canada. The French and the Italians, probably that's the 30% number I'm giving you. And when I say 30%, it's not all or none. It's very variable levels of urolithin A that you will see. So in the US, it's like only 10 to 12, 15% people are getting exposed to urolithin A from the diet. So
mm,
what I mean is that everybody needs to, whoever doesn't have the capacity. I've tested my own gut microbiome. I can't make it
mm,
because I took a lot of antibiotics growing up, and my gut microbiome has never receded back to its healthy state. And
mm.
so, folks like me and others who can make it need to supplement it to derive the health benefits. And those that make it, well, they can take lower doses, but they need a certain threshold to see the health benefits.
Mm. Because I think it's so interesting, Doc, that this compound can actually come in and actually help your mitochondria repair themselves. So when we see that we can actually supplement with it, and people can actually start to stabilize their aging process, are you seeing like individuals that have, let's say, some brain issues, like memory issues, brain fog, those kind of conditions, are they actually being helped as well whenever you supply urolithin A?
So we haven't really done the hardcore randomized placebo-controlled trials in, let's say, mild cognitive decline because of the reason that if you do these kind of trials, the regulatory bodies can see it more as a drug trial versus a
Mm,
nutritional trial. That's one of the reasons. But in the populations we have tested it, and that goes from a 21-year-old Olympian middle distance runner to an 89-year-old lady with fatigue issues. We have supplemented this and tested it in different clinical trial populations. And I can tell you, in the older adults, it improves their strength and endurance, so people can go about 20% longer doing their daily activities. In folks like me, mid 40, early 50s, what we are seeing is that in the absence of radically changing your diet or exercise levels, it imparts a benefit to your muscle strength and muscle performance. And even in the sort of the athletic population, like the middle distance runner I was talking about, we see that overtraining is inducing mitochondrial damage and inflammation. And this molecule, urolithin A, can help dampen some of that muscle damage and inflammation. Now, consumers, we've been commercializing this for a few years, and people are writing to me that it's helping for a number of things that you talked about, things like brain fog, etc.
mm. That's and with Doc, with this though too, how old should a person start with this? Then you're saying like the young people who did have damage, and you have an older person. Do they start pretty young, like taking urolithin A?
I think the sweet spot is really in the starting 40 and be above, because um, we have done work where we have looked at where are the biggest changes happening at a molecular level. And others, Stanford just published, a group in Stanford just published, they took about hundreds of individuals and they tracked them from their 40s to the 70s. It must have been a long 30-year study. And what they did was they actually every few years they went and looked at their all the proteins in their blood, and it's really clear that there's two seminal shifts in sort of the aging phenotype. One happens in the early 40s, and one
Mm,
happens sort of in the early 60s. And so I believe you don't need to wait for the second one. The sweet spot of where most of the aging changes are starting to upset the foundation of cellular health actually happen around the 40 plus population. Now, there are athletes, there are gym goers who can benefit from it even earlier. And we have done
Mm.
studies showing that.
Yes, I would. I started taking it, doc, and I was actually telling my nephews, they're like in their early 20s. I was like, you need to get on this stuff because I think about the amount of gut damage that put in my own body at young age. I mean, doc, I drank a lot of Coca-Cola, I ate Pop Tarts, and I could see like them taking to cut this off at the pass. So you're repairing with this cellular debris like the mitochondria. Do they find like we were talking before about mitochondria being in different areas, like they have higher amounts of these little mitochondria. And I'm not trying to shift too much, but you say the 40 to 60 spot. People out there listening, like there's some things that I called MTHFR. I know you know all about this and you can talk about it. I'm not trying to go down this rabbit hole too much, but when they get to 40 and 60, is it because like the genes also kind of, is that what it is? The genes start to wear out because of all the toxicities and debris?
Yeah, so this is a concept where what you'll hear people talk about biological age a lot. This is sort of these methylation patterns. So it's sort of, your genetics, your DNA is like a compact disc. So if you think about your compact disc that you've had for the last 20 years, it has a lot of scratches on it because just
Mm-hmm.
if you're playing, and so we just count the number of scratches on the genome that shows the stress level of different things, your diet, your stress levels, your sleeping habits. And this is that this has led to almost in the longevity field this whole idea that there's something called your chronological age. So for
Mm.
example, I'm 47 years old, but maybe I've been eating well, I've been taking my supplementation, things like Urolithin A. I try to do some fasting here and there. And so maybe my biological age could be lower. Maybe it could be the age of a 40-year-old. And so
Mm.
that's how, the field is progressing in terms of what is, changing the mindset of medical practice from treating symptoms to really thinking about cellular health.
And so, with that cellular aging, so your body could be this age, your cell could be another. What is the test that you like to use? Or I'm not trying to promote any lab, but is there a particular test you like to use for that?
So there are lots and lots of tests, and this has become, I would say, this has become a sort of even a marketing whose is better. So I think all these tests are picking up the same signal. It's just how we interpret them, right? So you have all these different what we call algorithms of calculating aging clocks, and that's where people can't really agree. In my latest randomized clinical trial, I've been using something from a U.S. based company called True Diagnostics,
Diagnostics.
and they look at a whole body sort of effect, and it's looking also at things like immune age because you prick your finger and you spot a few drops of blood, and that's how they can get access to your samples, and they can tell you from your immune cells could it be even your muscle age or your brain age. So they have this sort of very whole body approach to it, and just the robustness of the data is good. There are other things coming up in the field where you can even get a scan of your face and at a very high resolution, and it can pick up things like how much are your wrinkles and things like this, and give you your facial age. And so I think this whole
Wow.
whole field is kind of coalescing into what I call the multi-component aging score.
Yeah. Because, Doc, I know you know more about this than I do, but like in the facial, like the creases, because in Chinese medicine, I always I look at facial diagnosis and hand diagnosis and the work, like in the lines and how certain lines relate to certain organs. And again, guys out there, I'm not trying to go on a rabbit trail, but they're talking about how there's technology that can, I say measure, but like can use the facial nerve with all the nerve endings and see all the lines in the face and can actually get a graph of what your brain is thinking or how your brain is operating. And I just think the technology, doctor, is like really going forward. And I mean, I'm looking forward to this. Is that like to switch, not to switch gears too much, but like the timeline, the serum and such, and that's what you're starting to see. Like, is that's what's also able to help skin, like the outward appearance as well, like with urolithin A.
Yeah, I mean, it started with a very two very simple ideas. One was folks who were the early adopters on our oral products coming and telling, "Hey,
Uh huh.
my husband just told me my skin is looking very good, and I'm taking your pills regularly. Um, is there what is the data you have on skin?" And the second one was in parallel us asking, "Well, we know this great gut compound, this gut postbiotic urolithin A, is having these remarkable effects on muscle and brain cells, which have a lot of mitochondria. What about skin cells mitochondria?" And so we actually
Mm.
found evidence that if you look at a 30, 40-year-old person's skin cells and a 65-year-old's skin cells, the mitochondria are again very similar, like the muscle cells. Is in an older person the mitochondria is shot and damaged, and in a younger person they're healthy and vibrant. And so what
Mm.
that basically seeded the idea. Let's put it in creams and do more clinical based research to show that is there an effect on signs of skin aging and hallmarks of skin aging, and it was very similar. It improves the mitochondrial regenerative capacity, and it has an effect on skin inflammation, which we all are getting slammed by harmful UV rays, pollutants in the environment, even things like soaps and shampoos. So I think that there is the evidence is very consistent.
I mean, that's amazing, Doc, when you say like how it's like literally like helping us age further. So let's say you said like in your 40s to 50s, you had a bad, your diet like caused this overgrowth. So if people out there listening saying, okay, what's your hallmark of saying how many would I take? So if you got your cellular damage report back, do you recommend like on the timeline, like taking one a day, two a day, three a day according to your damage, or is there like a normal dosage?
Yeah, so I'm an evidence-based person. I'm a clinical trialist, so I have to go by the data I see in randomized placebo-controlled studies, which for me is the topmost evidence bar. And so what we see is 500 milligram, which is two pills if you're taking pills, or we also have a powder version, which is one sachet of 500 milligrams of urolithin A. So 500 milligrams of urolithin A or mitopure sounds like the sweet spot at which, if you're healthy, if you're doing the good stuff, if you're sleeping well, if you're eating well, if you're exercising well, that is kind of the foundational dose that keeps your cells in a happy state, if I can call that, and your
Mm,
mitochondria in a happy state. Now, when we go higher in our studies in folks who have more inflammation or have lower energy levels, they get fatigued more. We see the higher doses giving even an augmented effect in addition. And so it's again just like any practitioner. If you see somebody who has very high C-reactive protein, for example, this is a biomarker of inflammation in the body,
mm.
or people who have fatigue, who don't have a lot left in the tank at the end of the day, I would start a bit higher, a gram, and then once they feel the energy boost, they can switch back to 500 milligram.
Mm.
And there are folks who, as I said, who are blessed, who may be already making it, and they can even take even a lower dose if they want. You know.
I am so impressed because, doctor, I'm always like I'm here in the clinic, usually working with patients pretty much all day, and I started taking that when I first got a while back, and I've noticed that my longevity during the day has been, even my awareness in my brain has gotten so much more steady. Like I can go till late. I'm not suggesting that you just work all day, but I found that my energy levels have gotten longer, but a very good steady energy, not like a hyped up energy. It's a very steady calm. So not only does it help with aging and it helps with the actual mitochondria healing, what are you seeing in the future of mitochondrial health? Maybe that's a big question, but what do you see like the forum going with urolithin A or with mitochondrial health in general?
Yeah. So where I believe where we are at in terms of we've been at it for 15 years of research, and now more and more top scientists and clinicians are starting to study it. So For example, like just last year, we had three groups report independently: one from Harvard, one from the Buck Institute in California, and one here
Mm.
in Europe, all showing that during cognitive damage with the aging process, the number one shot biological pathway was mitophagy, meaning that the
Wow.
neurons, which have, as you were saying, thousands and thousands of mitochondria, once all these get damaged, they just can't be cleaned up. And so, if you look in the brains of people with any kind of dementia, all you find is damaged mitochondria in neuron cells. And so, what they found after screening many drugs or natural compound was that Urolithin A was one of the most potent at clearing this damage out. So I think that for me is really the big area where I see our research and others' research going is how does this augment cognitive health and the decline? Because the two things that really hit you when you age, one is your mobility, and the other is your cognitive capacity, and the third
Mm.
probably is a weakened immune system. So if you can improve these three, I think you can really impact health span. And so I think that's where the longevity field is now going to move, is trying to see interventions that can attack all these three key organ systems: brain, muscle, and immune.
That's great. So everybody out there, remember he was talking about mobility, neurological thinking, like these are ways and you got to make sure that when you start to take like urolithin A that you're trying to do all these aspects to actually help you improve. Now, is there, doc, a certain type of exercise? Maybe that's reaching too much, but do you think that with mitochondria health that you think high intensity is really good, or do you think like low level? What is your personal preference?
So any kind of exercise is good for your mitochondria, but there have been studies done on high interval intensity training that show and aerobic, sort of exercise that show that that helps mitochondria augment even better. But any kind of exercise, aerobic resistance is very good for the mitochondria. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, Doc, this has been so enlightening because now with the emphasis now on aging, do you feel that the general population, if they follow these guidelines, you're going to see even like not just longevity, but like a more healthy longevity? Because some people like they'll live a long time and they're not really that healthy at all.
Yeah, so I'm more in that second camp where I want to see 70, 80-year olds be functional, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, with my story, trained as a clinician, I was seeing all these old people not just have what I call this functional capacity to even get up from a chair and move around and play with their grandkids. So I think that to me is really this healthy longevity. When you're 80, if you can cross the zebra crossing, the 15, 20 seconds the traffic light gives you.
Yeah.
I mean, most people, I mean, being a practitioner, most people, old people, they have the time they come to the hospital is because they had a fall, right? And
Yes.
they're
Yeah.
trying to speed up. They're trying to rush through stairs or cross, and they get hit by because So I think if you have this residual capacity, if you can play with your grandkids and do your grocery shopping, I think that to me is the holy grail.
I'm with you, doc. I always try to tell my patients the one thing I really want, I mean, all of these is mobility and my cognitive thinking and just having a more vibrant life. And we are going to put like if we can like your research in our show notes to make sure people see the emphasis of what your studies have shown. So I know this is a little bit going down a different path in personal life, but I say this: you're smart, you're brilliant, you're telling us all these things about how to increase your health. I have to ask my guests, like, what do you like to do for a hobby? What is like something like you like to do to give you some joy in your life and such, to bring a little heat, they say, to the heart fire in Chinese medicine?
Yeah. Well, I'm lucky to be based in Switzerland, which is a country of mountains. So I just love hiking and trekking.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that's kind of building resilience, both from a muscle perspective and cognitive. And when you're hiking down mountains or hiking up mountains, you always have to watch out. What's the path I want to take to the
Mm-hmm.
top? So it's really, for me, that's what I love doing. But I think I would leave your audience with saying that, there is no magic bullet. There is no magic supplement out there that can do the job. I think it's really doing all the basic things right. So physical activity, be more active, be uh, maybe practice intermittent fasting, and really think of
Mm,
things like urolithin A as the third foundational pillar of improving your cellular health, on which you can build on the other layers, whatever you're doing.
mm. Doc, these have been great words, and I'm with you. I take mine every single day, and I'm so impressed. But I'm also encouraging all my patients to take it, and I encourage everybody out there listening to take it. So, Doctor, we know that Timeline is the company and the product, but where can people find you? Like when people want to hear your information, where can they come to see you and follow you?
Yeah, so they can obviously look at all the research publications. They can go to a website called mitopure.com, which is really all the research studies and the science behind the discovery of urolithin A, which is the proprietary version is what is called mitopure. And they can participate in some clinical studies if they want. As I mentioned, I've designed a test that can tell you if your body is naturally making urolithin A or not. And this is right now as part of a clinical test, so they can sign up. They receive a beautiful diagnostic kit, and they can test it out.
That's fantastic, Doctor. We are going to put the notes within the caption, everyone, that can get you in connection with this test and that you can see all the clinical research. Again, Doctor, we are so grateful and thankful that you took the time of today out in beautiful Switzerland. I have never been there. I wish I could go one day, but one of these days I'll head out to the mountains. So, everyone, I want you guys to check out MitoPure. Look at Timeline. I guarantee you it is one of the strongest products I've tested and used in my practice and on myself. So, thank you again, Doctor. And from all of us here at the Ancient Health Podcast, we're grateful that you guys joined us. Remember, like and subscribe. And if you have anybody you know that has mitochondrial issues, aging issues, any type of injury to the mitochondria from this conversation, please forward them this podcast. Until next time, thank you, everyone.